I am Laura Dixon, and you are listening to the Naturally Thin for Life podcast, episode number 54, All or Nothing. Welcome to the Naturally Thin for Life podcast. I'm going to teach you how to get out of your diet brain so that you too can be naturally thin for life. No counting, restricting, or obsessing. I am going to take the mystery out of it for you so that you can become naturally thin starting today. Are you ready? Let's do this. Friends, welcome back to the podcast. For those of you that have been here since the beginning, we have been together for over a year by the time you're listening to this. How fun is that? I knew being an entrepreneur and starting my own business would mean I would need to develop some skill sets that I did not have or need previously. And I have done a lot of things I would have never thought I would have needed to figure out how to do. For example, figure out how to record a podcast in my closet in the beginning. Thankfully, that didn't last too long because I got a fancy new microphone shortly thereafter. But seriously, some of the things I've done, I could have never predicted that I would have needed to figure them out. But to be honest, first of all, I love a good challenge. And I have this belief about myself that I can figure out absolutely anything. Like, I truly believe that I can figure it out. I will figure it out. And do you know where that belief came from? It genuinely came, like, in my bones, I believe it. That came from my journey of losing weight and not struggling with this anymore. Because I lost weight, I kept it off, and I'm naturally thin, and it's genuinely easy for me now. After years of dieting and obsessing, literally, it's like I've blown my own mind with how I think about food and how it just is a part of me now that I truly believe I can figure out anything, including starting a podcast, figuring out the technology, editing it, producing it myself. And now, after a year of doing that, I of course still plan and record it for you, but I no longer edit and produce it, and it's glorious. Love it. But even when you think about that, thinking about doing something you haven't done before, figuring something out, when you compare that to losing weight, being naturally thin, and genuinely having it feel effortless, right? Everything else pales in comparison. Once you're able to do that, everything else, you just get to know that, like, this thing that felt so difficult, it felt like you were going to struggle with it forever, it's genuinely behind you. You get to feel like you can figure out anything. So I tell you all that because being successful, and for me, definitely being an entrepreneur, means I get the all or nothing thinking. If you would ask people in my life, especially people that knew me kind of when I still struggled with a lot of my anxiety and my relationship with food, if you ask people to describe me, for sure, all or nothing or obsessive or type A, that would come up in how people describe me. So I get the all or nothing thinking, being all in or all out. Like, really being all in with the grit and the grind and the willpower, or being completely all out. And so guess what? I'm not even going to talk you out of letting go of this all or nothing thinking. But I want to first talk about how you use it. And before we get started with this episode and really diving in, just as a reminder, if you're loving the podcast and enjoying the podcast, don't forget to write a review, leave a review. It helps the podcast platform know to suggest the podcast to other people. And like I said before, I love imagining a world where every woman is truly free from the obsession with her weight, not just for herself, but so that she can pass that example on to her daughters, and so that we can truly put this struggle behind us. So if you are getting a lot out of the podcast, I say thank you for leaving a review. And I know the women that haven't found the podcast yet also say thank you. So When you think about this all or nothing thinking, I want to think about and describe to you how you're currently using it. So right now, for many of you, all in means you are really all in on being super restricted and deprived and counting and obsessing and exercising like a crazy person. Or the nothing means you aren't doing any of those things and you are overeating and you are not being obsessive in your actions and in how you think you should be eating and how you think you should be counting and measuring. But you're still obsessive in your mind. You have this up and down roller coaster of being all in or all out, which, can we all agree, just isn't really helping you get to the place where you're at a weight that feels really comfortable and that it's easy for you. There is a rule following, but also simultaneously, rebellious tendency to which your brain operates. So it thinks I'm all in, meaning I'm doing what I quote unquote should be doing. And then it rebels against that when it's quote unquote all out. And you say, I'm going to do whatever I want to do and F it to whatever diet or rule you're following. Because here's why it works this way. You have this back and forth between the rule follower and the rebellious part of you because neither you're all in of counting, restricting, or obsessing, or you're all out of overeating and being uncomfortable in your body. Neither of those are truly aligned with your deepest, truest desire of how you want to live your life. Neither of them are aligned with being naturally thin, and it genuinely is effortless because you allow your hunger and satisfy your hunger in a way that feels really right for your body. Hence, the back and forth between the rule follower, all in, and the rebellious part of you that's all out. So when we have a thought pattern that isn't helping you, it isn't helping you create the behaviors, the actions that support the result you want, we have a couple of options. But I want you to think about it today from two perspectives. First, you can realize the thought you're having is totally optional and it isn't helping you. So you can question it and challenge it, and you can see how it doesn't serve you and genuinely let it go. But there's also a second option, which is what we're going to do on this podcast, that you can actually keep the thought pattern, but change the perspective to how you use it. So you can actually keep the all or nothing way of thinking, but we're just going to shift the way in which you use it in your life in a way that genuinely serves you. So part of this is because there are times in your life that all or nothing way of thinking does serve you and you like it. That's why you have it. It's also, for many of you, a part of how you see yourself. And that can be why it can feel difficult to let it go in your relationship with food and losing weight. So when you have a thought pattern, like being a person, if you describe yourself that way as I'm just a person who's all in or all out, I'm an all or nothing person. If you describe yourself that way, then there's a part of you that sees it as being beneficial, especially in other areas of your life, like maybe your career or relationships or other areas in which you have success. Then when you identify that all or nothing way of thinking as a part of you, when you think about letting it go in your relationship with food, there's often a fear that if you do let it go, that it will mean you will put on more weight, and it sort of can feel like you're denying a part of yourself that you truly enjoy and that you truly love. None of which is really true, and we can do kind of some thought work to get around that, but I want you to keep your all or nothing way of thinking and just change how you use it. Because, for example, myself, I love my all or nothing thinking at a lot of times in my life. So, for example, when I worked in a corporate career and even now as an entrepreneur, I use the all or nothing thinking to help me compartmentalize different parts of my life and different parts of my day. And you probably do too. My all or nothing thinking allows me to be hyper focused when I'm working. I'm like all in on what I'm doing. So I'm not thinking about my kids. I'm not thinking about my husband. I'm not thinking about what we're having for dinner. I'm not thinking about what we're doing later today. It allows me to be super productive so that when I am with my family, then when I'm not working, I get to be really focused on them. So this all or nothing thinking allows me to create a lot, to be really productive, to be really focused, and then to have the freedom to be really present with my family. So being in that all or nothing way of thinking can help you, and it helps me. And so then when we try to take that away from us, when we do use it in a way that we like and enjoy, our brain will often come up with a lot of resistance around letting it go. So that's why I don't even want you to let it go. When I was in my corporate job, I used to leave the office and drive home. The last job I had was only about a 15-minute drive. And I would maybe work a little bit in the evening after the kids went to bed or on the weekend, but it was time I had set aside. And so then, when I was all in on working in the office, I was able to get so much done that then I was able to turn off that part of my brain and be all in with my family and not be worried about work and worried about what I needed to do. So I loved that part of me that allowed myself to be all in at work and then be all in with my family. So the amazing news for you is that you can keep it too. And first, I want you to also let go of the fear that if you change your all or nothing approach, you will actually put on weight. That's what a lot of us fear. That even though the counting and the restricting and the deprivation and the obsession isn't serving you and it's not where you want to be long term, you have a fear that if you let go of that quote unquote rule following, here are all of the things I should be doing, if you let that go, then you'll put on even more weight. But let's be honest. You are already all in all of the time. You are either all in on restricting and depriving and counting, or you're all in on giving into the food. Either way, you are all in on all the obsessing. You are either obsessing about what you aren't eating, or obsessing about what you are eating, or obsessing about what you should be eating or shouldn't be eating. So you're obsessing all of the time, no matter if you're all in or all out. So let's just all agree you're already all in all of the time. You're already obsessing. So now let's just use it to your advantage by shifting the perspective through which you use your all or nothing thinking. Let's redirect some of that obsessive energy to actually get you to where you want to be. And of course, there's always the option to let it go. And I talk more about that in the episode on perfectionist eating, which doesn't serve you, which is episode 42. So you can, of course, go back to that. But I want to give you permission in this episode to keep your all or nothing thinking and how to use it to help you. First, now that you've agreed, you're all in on all the obsessing, I want you to notice how that all or nothing thinking serves you in other areas of your life. Like when I gave you the example about myself and how often it allows us to really go full steam ahead and then take a break and go full steam ahead and take a break. Or it allows us often to compartmentalize different areas of our life. But here in your relationship with food and losing weight, there is no quote unquote nothing thinking. When you think about being all in or all out, in your career, for example, you may be all in and really focused and getting a lot done. And then when you get to the nothing part of it, you're maybe with your family or you finished a project and now you get a reprieve, or you're on vacation and you don't have to think about work. But with food, there is no nothing. We have to eat forever. And so we don't get to just willpower our way and then pump the brakes. The perspective I want you to see is that you can be all in on doing this for the rest of your life. You can be all in on creating a relationship with food, hunger, a relationship with yourself that is sustainable, that you enjoy, that you love, that you can do forever. The all or nothing thinking you're using in your career or in other areas of your life to accomplish something has a short, finite, day-to-day basis. You approach it from a different perspective. When you think about being all in on going to grad school, all in on getting your work done in an 8-hour window or a 10-hour window, all in on completing a project, there's this release and reprieve on the other side. But when you use that all or nothing thinking with food, you're all in on a diet and the reprieve is overeating. But when you're just all in on being naturally thin, is just who you are, is just your way of being, it lets go of that strong desire to need the reprieve because there's nothing that you need a reprieve from. When you think about the thought pattern of a naturally thin woman and how she thinks, what do you think she's thinking about when it comes to all or nothing? Do you think she's thinking, well, I'm all in today and I'm all out tomorrow? Of course not. She's just all in all the time on being naturally thin as a part of her. She's all in on creating an effortlessness with her relationship with food that you get to have forever, one that you enjoy, one that allows you to be at a weight that feels comfortable, one that allows you to easily feel your hunger and satisfy your hunger and stop the obsession. She's all in on doing this for the rest of her life, not just as a New Year's resolution. So commit to being all in as you develop this new version of you that just doesn't struggle with this. All in on finding your way of being naturally thin for the rest of your life without the deprivation, without the restriction or the obsession. All in on being a calmer, more peaceful version of you who easily does this. Because then when you are all in from that perspective, then when you're on your journey and you do overeat, and maybe you're 90% satisfied, but genuinely you feel more comfortable at 75% satisfied. But you do eat past 75%, you're like, I'm about 90% satisfied. When that happens and you're thinking, I'm all in on figuring this out and I'm all in on being naturally thin forever, I'm all in on doing this for the rest of my life, you use that moment to learn. You use that moment to understand yourself in a way that you know what to change going forward. You stop using the finite all or nothing thinking I'm all in today or I'm all out tomorrow. You stop using that way of thinking against yourself to then keep eating past 90% full to being 110% full because you've told yourself, well, I guess I'm all out today. I'll be all in tomorrow. You get out of that up and down and you stop telling yourself, see, I'm never going to do this. See, this is impossible for me. And then decide to keep eating to prove to yourself that it is impossible for you and to prove to yourself that you're never going to do it. When you're all in on being naturally thin is just a part of who you are, you don't even want to keep eating. When you use the all in way of thinking with the perspective of something you're just going to do for the rest of your life. Know that you are already all in. Be all in for the growth that creates the mind that is easily naturally thin. Be all in on finding how it can be easy. Be all in on finding how it can be effortless. Be all in on the learning to be with yourself without food. Be all in on learning to love yourself and accept your humanness and that you aren't perfect all of the time and that you don't need to be perfect all of the time. You don't need to eat in a really restrictive, depriving way. You don't need to count and obsess. Be all in on learning how to be with any emotion and not even wanting the food. Be all in on learning what true hunger feels like. Learning what is my true physical sensation of hunger and what is my emotional hunger that feels like I just want to fill an empty void. Be all in on allowing your hunger and satisfying your hunger and knowing exactly what food feels really comfortable in your body. Be all in on being in a body that feels amazing. Be all in on losing the desire to even want to overeat because you never feel like you need to. Be all in on feeling like food has no power over you and you just get to decide what to eat and you get to decide what food feels good and comfortable and allows you to be at a weight that you truly enjoy. Be all in on finding exactly how to make this effortless for you. Because friends, you are already all in. Now lean into that energy in a way that actually helps you get to your goal. Ask your future self, Your future self who genuinely allows her hunger, satisfies her hunger. She knows exactly why she loses weight. She knows exactly why she doesn't lose weight. And she knows exactly what to do about it without deprivation or restriction. That version of you that has no desire to overeat as a way to distract herself from something she is experiencing, that version, how is it easy for her? How is she all in different than how you are all in right now? Start being that form of all in. If you are ready to take this work and go all in on being naturally thin for the rest of your life, I will help you get there. Listen to the outro to learn more about working with me. And friends, I hope you all have an amazing day. I will talk with you all next week. Friends, are you ready to put the struggle and obsession behind you for good? I will teach you how to take this work and really apply it to your specific brain and your specific body so that you come back to your innate brain-body connection. Your brain and body start to work in sync, and when they work together, it stops feeling like your brain is your biggest obstacle, and it feels like it's finally working for you. You easily allow your hunger and satisfy your hunger, and being naturally thin becomes just a part of who you are. The obsession fades into the distance, and it feels effortless. Head over to lauradixoncoaching.com/work with me to learn more.